Your Grace Bishop Daniel, Bishop of Sydney and affiliated regions, Your Grace Bishop Daniel, Abbot of St. Shenouda Monastery, Premier Gladys Berejiklian, parliamentarians, ecumenical guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and joy to be with you this evening. And I was delighted to know of this function and the kind invitation of Bishop Daniel. And I want to tell you a story. And this is the story of a migrant family, one of the first immigrant families to Australia. And I'll tell you why I share this story with you after I complete it. Saturday, 29 April 1967, was a day that changed my life forever. It was the day I arrived with my parents and younger brother to Australia. Arriving in Fremantle, Western Australia, on the Marconi cruise ship, we left Port Said, Egypt, several weeks prior, and just before the Suez Canal was closed, and only 2 months before the 1967 war broke out. We arrived into Port Melbourne on the 3rd of May, and from there transported to the Bonegilla Migrant Centre on the border between Victoria and New South Wales. And my dad left us in Bonegilla and went up to Sydney to look for work. My mum tells me of the difficult and unfavorable conditions at Bonegilla and how she would every night put my brother and I to sleep and push her bed tight behind the door due to the many crimes that took place regularly against women where their husbands had gone to other cities to look for work. My brother and I developed measles at Bonegilla, and my mum was alone to try and care for us in freezing conditions at Bonegilla in winter, as it was in May at that time. My dad was a watchmaker by trade. I'm sure some of you in the room remember him, and could not find work due to the lack of required Australian experience, and ended up finding work in the postal service for the first 11 months. Luckily, finding that work did not take time, and he was able to come to Bonegilla and bring us to our first rented apartment at number 8, apartment 17, George Street in Marrickville, which cost $19.50 per week to rent. My mum worked in a factory that made bags and earned $28 per week, and my father just a little more than that. And within months of settling in Sydney, our apartment was broken into and valuables brought from Egypt were stolen and the home ransacked. My dad opened up his first watchmaker business in Dulwich Hill at the end of the first year, and thieves 2 weeks after opening broke in and stole all the new watches on display, and he had no insurance and lost all of his savings. This story, I am sure, is not dissimilar, I imagine, from many other Coptic and other immigrant families that arrived to Australia in the 1960s and early 70s. And I tell you this story because I want to honor those pioneers who came here and made Australia home more than 50 years ago. To me, they are heroes and they are trailblazers, coming to a far country with a different language, different culture, no family or friends to greet them when they arrived, no church to welcome them, no weekly and daily liturgies, no priests, no religious education for their children, absolutely nothing. But these families were really courageous people, coming here to make a new start for themselves and for their families, and yet there was no churches for them, no priest to pastor to them. And I remember my parents telling me how saddened they were that there was no Coptic church, that they would gather together in the Salvation Army, and they would have a Bible study together. They would sing some hymns, and then they would go home. And they felt so depressed and started to doubt, why did they come to this country? But they were also people of vision. And in gathering together there in the Salvation Army, they decided to write to Saint Pope Carolus VI a letter requesting a priest to come and to serve them. And so really I applaud them, and I ask all of you to honor and applaud those early settlers and the work they did to establish the Coptic Orthodox Church here in Sydney and all over Australia. I'm indebted to my parents, Yusuf Gerges of blessed memory, and my mother, Helda Gerges, may God bless her life, and my brother Zarif, because they really gave me a great opportunity in this country, as did so many other parents for their children. The education that I had in this country, I would not have had this opportunity perhaps when I was in Egypt, to be able to complete my degree in Bachelor of Science and a diploma in education at the University of Sydney, and to go on to complete several master's degree and a PhD at Fordham University in New York. I would not have been able to achieve all of this. And I'm really indebted to my parents for that, because as many Coptic parents always encourage their children to achieve the best possible outcome for their education. But not only this, I'm indebted for them that they did not allow me to speak English at home. They would always say to me, at home you speak Arabic. You will learn the English anyway at school. And this was really wonderful for me, because I was able to preserve the Arabic language. And this was so important, whereas so many other people that grew up in this country from our community hardly know any Arabic. And I think it's to our detriment. Always knowing a second and a third language is so important. And for me especially, when I came to do my PhD at Fordham University in New York, which was concerning a very distinguished archdeacon at the turn of the 20th century, Saint Archdeacon Habib Gerges, all of the material and the archival material was all in the Arabic language. And so if I did not know Arabic, I would not have been able to complete this very important study. So for this reason, I am also indebted to my dear parents. But also, I want to just mention a few brief memories that I have, particularly here in Sydney. And certainly, I cannot forget very Reverend Father Mina Na'matallah of blessed memory. This was a great man with a great vision, coming again to a country that he did not know, having to learn the language, coming with his wife, Tasoni Tafida, and I'm so honored to see that she's with us tonight. And with his 4 children, Eva, Anton, and Edmond, and Albert. I still remember Eva's hats at church. Very wonderful hats that she used to wear to liturgies every Sunday. But also, particularly Anton, particularly Edmond, who's also here with us tonight. We were at Marrickville West Public School together, and so I have fond memories of those days. And Albert, his brother, was my Sunday school teacher. And he had a great impact on my life, which he probably for the first time hears tonight. And this is a message for every Sunday school teacher here this evening. Don't take your work as a Sunday school teacher as a chore, but understand it through Christian principles and what it means to love and to care for the children under your care and the impact that you will have on these children. And you, Albert, had a great impact on my life, and I'll never forget those days as well. I also remember 1978 very, very vividly and clearly, and a young man at that time called Murad, who's sitting on the head table with us tonight. And that is His Grace Bishop Daniel, the abbot of St. Shenouda Monastery. I remember very clearly that Sunday that Bishop Antonius Marcos was in Sydney, the metropolitan now of South Africa, who came to take this young man to become a monk in Egypt. And I remember the youth in the airport as we were seeing off the young Murad, carrying him on their shoulders, so proud of him as the first Australian Copt to go back to lead a monastic life. And that day had such a great impact on my life. And from that instant, I was 15 years old in year 10 at the time at Tempe High School. And I put it in my mind and my heart and said, that's it. I want to follow the example of this young man. And in 1991, I left for the monastery. I also remember a very other beautiful memory with His Grace Bishop Daniel, with the first youth trip that he organized for us in 1986, and maybe some people in the audience today were with us on that trip. And it was the first trip that he organized for us to go to Egypt. And I had just finished my first year teaching at Fairvale High School as a maths teacher, and His Grace organized, he was a monk at the time, Father Daniel Antoni, for this wonderful 1-month trip, pilgrimage to Egypt. And for the majority of us, it was the first time to go back to Egypt since we migrated. And the places that we saw there, the monasteries, the churches, meeting with many of the bishops. But the highlight, and I remember this night very clearly, was at the papal residence at St. Bishoy Monastery, when for most of us, the first time for us was to meet face to face with the charismatic leader of our church at that time, His Holiness Pope Shenouda III of blessed memory. And we sat in the auditorium. It was like a paparazzi event, with everyone out with their cameras, just wanting to take photos of His Holiness and to listen to him speak and the wise teachings that he gave us. And he was so happy to welcome us to Egypt. And this was after a very difficult time for Pope Shenouda, when he was under house arrest for 3.5 years at the time of the late President Sadat from 1981 till the beginning of January 1985. And this trip came 1 year after this. And His Holiness was so happy to meet his children from Australia. And I remember also distinctly the first papal visit of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III in 1989. This was the longest trip that Pope Shenouda took around the world to visit the churches and dioceses. And it was 112 days. And I remember traveling back to Cairo and meeting His Holiness in Singapore on the same flight back to Cairo after this long trip, going to Europe, America, Canada, and to Australia. And the 10 bishops that were with him, I think from memory, there was over 100 pieces of luggage that I removed from the conveyor belt in Cairo with Bishop Tadros. But we were so excited at this visit that the first time that a Coptic patriarch in the history of our church would visit this continent. And the people were so overjoyed all over Australia to see him. I remember every week there would be a bulletin from the organizing committee describing to us all of the preparations that were taking place. I got so excited about this visit that I thought it would be a wonderful idea to translate one of the books of His Holiness. And it was probably one of the most beautiful spiritual books that His Holiness wrote, and that was The Life of Repentance and Purity. And I would come back from work and spend several hours every evening with a dictionary in my hand, Arabic-English dictionary, and the text of the book, which was about 304 pages in Arabic from memory, and continued translating until I was happy to have completed it and was able to give a draft of the book to His Holiness on his arrival. And he was so happy to see this book to be almost coming to publication. A few years later, it was published by Coptic Orthodox Publication and Translation Committee here in Sydney. And a few years ago, it was, I edited it, and it was republished through St. Vladimir Seminary Press, which is the largest Eastern Orthodox press in the world, publishing English book, and became the fastest-selling book in their 50-year history. So people really enjoyed reading that book, and I certainly enjoyed translating it, and it brings so many wonderful memories here in Sydney. I congratulate His Grace Bishop Daniel on this wonderful occasion. I wish him every success, along with His Grace Bishop Daniel, the Abbot of St. Shenouda Monastery, and all of the amazing work, along with the Reverend Fathers and Deacons, and all the Sunday school teachers and youth leaders, and indeed all of this work that has been done in Australia for the past 50 years would not be possible without the generous donations, the love and the support of the amazing Coptic people here in Australia. God bless you all.